So I don't apologise for being a workaholic. I don't apologise for not being a media tart. What I do apologise for is that we've got a nation of politicians who seem to be more enamoured with doing a soundbite, doing a quick tweet, rather than listening to people who've got real problems and trying to address them.
Sadiq Khan is the Mayor of London, and with a general election campaign underway, one might expect to have seen a little bit more of the highest Labour official in the land. We got the chance today to speak to him about serious youth violence, whether he feels any regret about how he's dealt with that issue during his time in City Hall, and if he'll be having a tilt at the Labour leadership once Jeremy Corbyn's gone. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, hello.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. How's it going, you all right?
Bit cold, but not bad at all. Enjoying the campaign, 20 days to go, but thriving.
Tell us about this initiative then, enabling young people to create these films about serious youth violence.
Well, the London Filmmakers Project is about giving young Londoners a helping hand to have their potential fulfilled. What we've got is 40 young Londoners, aged between 15 and 24. They've been receiving help from digital cinema media from City Hall to make 6 films on a whole host of issues. One of them is on consequences of picking up a knife, getting involved in criminal gangs. There's another one dealing with negative stereotypes, and others dealing with our London story. And they're working with experts in the film industry, picking up the skills they need. And they'll be premiering this Sunday with Rapman's Blue Story at Genesis Cinema. So I'm really excited.
You just mentioned there about the negative stereotypes and how this work challenges negative stereotypes. Why do you think those stereotypes exist? Is it because of how widespread serious youth violence is in London, or is it perhaps because of latent prejudices that people feel, perhaps towards young people, perhaps towards people of ethnic minority backgrounds?
It's a complex issue, but serious youth violence in London has been going up since 2012. Youth violence across the country began up since 2014. Unfortunately, though, what happens is stereotypes are perpetuated and prejudices can be compounded. And one of my concerns when I speak to young people is they're fed up with all young people being labelled as criminals. All young people are assumed to belong to a criminal gang. It's particularly worse if you're a young black Londoner. If you're a young Londoner of African Caribbean heritage, you're more likely it's a fact to be stopped and searched. You're more likely it's a fact to get sucked into the criminal justice system, but also you're more likely it's a fact to have prejudice against you, which means your ability to have your potential fulfilled, to get the job you deserve, is limited. And one of the things we're trying to do from City Hall is rebut those negative stereotypes, but also to give that helping hand to young Londoners to have their potential fulfilled.
Do you think the UK is a racist country?
Oh, that's a big statement. I think the way I'd answer that is this: as a minority, both in religious terms and in ethnic terms, there's no other place in the world I'd rather live than London. I say that as a parent of 2 daughters. We've got laws here that's some of the best laws in the world, but that doesn't mean all the problems have gone away. So whereas we don't have now in 2019 the sort of overt racism there was when my dad first came to this country, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, there is below the radar racism. And one of my concerns about what we've seen over the last 3-4 years with Brexit, with the rise of nativist populist movements, is that's come to the surface. So words that had gone out of use, the P word for people like me, the N word for other people, are now used more in the last few years than they've been for the last 20 years. And certainly words that I thought were now expunged from the English language are now back in use.
Do you think Brexit's opened that can of worms? Do you think that vote has emboldened people to feel?
Yeah, look, one of the things why I've been not embarrassed to talk about political correctness. Political correctness means not being offensive, not using abusive words, guarding against improper behaviour. And what Brexit has done is it's brought to the surface things that were latent. And it worries me, but also what should worry us is you've got mainstream politicians using language that gives confidence and succour to those on the extremes. So, for example, when you talk about the clothes people wear because of their religious beliefs as being akin to a bank robber or a letterbox, that causes problems. And we saw a spike in hate crimes after Boris Johnson used those words. When you've got Nigel Farage using posters talking about breaking point with pictures of clearly people of colour, don't be surprised if people's prejudice rise to the surface. And it's a fact. You can do a curve between the Brexit campaign and the rise in hate crime, and that should trouble us, but should make sure that all of us redouble our efforts to address this.
Let's come back to serious youth violence. The films that we've been talking about, they reflect a grim reality. There are record levels of knife crime in England and Wales, you mentioned it yourself. London has become a symbol of that. And a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, think that you're responsible for that. How do you answer those criticisms?
Well, I am responsible for London, and I've taken the chin criticisms about our city. I'm doing what I can. but I've got one hand tied behind my back. I, since 2016, have been expressing concern about cuts from central government, cuts to policing, record numbers of cut, 3,500 police officers, on top of that 3,500 community officers, on top of that police staff. We've also had massive cuts to youth services, to after schools clubs, to schools, to mental health services. No one was listening. So we from City Hall have been putting in record sums of money to not just policing, but to preventative services, youth services. Now finally, there's a general election campaign, and you've got politicians promising extra police. What we need though is a public health approach. We need to deal with not just the causes of crime, but prevent it happening in the first place as well. And that's why it's really important that we hold our politicians to account. I'm happy to be held to account. There's some good news. I'm not complacent at all. Some of the good news is we're now providing youth services in London to more than 700,000 young people, not provided before. There's some good news. Violent injuries using knives for under 25s is going down. There's some good news. We've seen a stabilisation and a reduction in relation to gang-affiliated homicides, but also homicides for under 25s. I'm not complacent, but we need to make sure there's a proper consideration given to this issue, because it didn't happen overnight, and we need to make sure we address the causes of violent crime as well as the consequences.
You're coming to the end of your term. Do you feel a sense of regret about this issue?
I'm regretful that I wasn't more successful persuading central government to take this seriously. I tried to persuade David Cameron, Theresa May, as when they were Prime Ministers, they wouldn't listen. Tried to persuade Home Secretaries, Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, Sajid Javid, they weren't receptive. I take some consolation that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel are now talking about it. All they're talking about is 20,000 police officers across the country. We've lost 20,000 across the country. We need in London 6,000. That's the policing element. They're not talking about youth services, more resources for our schools, after-school clubs, and mental health. So I regret not being as successful lobbying them. The good news is, though, is as a city, we've been incredibly resilient. We're making some progress, and my frustration is central government don't seem to understand that it's for all of us to address this issue. I'm a firm believer in the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. All of us have a role to play: politicians, parents, youth leaders, civic society, faith leaders, the media, but it's got to be a massive investment from central government to make a big change.
I'm aware that you're giving us an interview now, but you don't feel as visible a mayor as the likes of Boris or Ken. Probably actually for the better, you're not on a zip wire waving Union Jacks around. But if you're doing good work, do you not think you should be slightly more in the public eye talking about it?
You know, one of the things that always frustrates me is how, because of some of our mainstream politicians, we're not taken seriously. I think this is a really serious job. I think it's a job for serious people. We can all talk in sound bites of 140 characters, but I think it's much more important than that. What we're going to be doing is not playing on people's fears, but addressing them. So having the conversation, listening to people. And so I don't apologise for being a workaholic. I don't apologise for not being a media tart. What I do apologise for is that we've got a nation of politicians who seem to be more enamoured with, doing a soundbite, doing a quick tweet, rather than listening to people who've got real problems and trying to address them.
There's a general election going on. Your party, the Labour Party, launched its manifesto yesterday. What's your favourite policy in the manifesto?
I like their house building policy. The idea we've got this massive ambition to build a record number of council homes really excites me. I love the fact that we're going to invest huge amounts in the NHS, 5% pay rise to public sector workers, but also invest in almost 5% in the NHS. I'm really, really proud of the investment in our schools. And actually, when you think about it, investing in young people so they've got the skills to do the jobs, investing in the health service so we've got a healthy workforce, but investing in housing so housing's affordable is a pro-business manifesto. So what frustrates me is when you've got pundits saying this is not a pro-business manifesto. Not true. By dealing with these issues, actually we're going to be pro-business. So I think it's a really exciting manifesto, and what it shows is actually a National Labour Party committed to dealing with the root causes of some of the challenges which have led to me coming to an MP surgery and seeing an MP having to help people in work food poverty.
There's a former Mayor of London in Downing Street. When Jeremy Corbyn's time as Labour leader comes to an end, whenever that is, would you ever tilt to the leadership?
Well, let me tell you this. Anybody who thinks that being the Mayor of London is a good qualification to be a Prime Minister, look at this guy. He's been a disaster. I'm looking forward to Jeremy Corbyn winning the general election. I'm looking forward to Jeremy Corbyn serving as the Prime Minister. And the great thing with Jeremy Corbyn, a Labour Prime Minister, is I think it'll mean better things for London, because we'll deal with the housing crisis. We'll have more support for the police, more support for youth services, more support for the NHS, more support for our schools. So actually, for me, it's a win-win. Jeremy Corbyn in number 10 means City Hall.
So if Boris Johnson is a bad Prime Minister, would you rule yourself out then?
Well,
as a potential Prime Minister?
If I was to use the rule book Boris Johnson has written, the answer is yeah, I'd be an awful Prime Minister. The good news is I intend to be the Mayor for the foreseeable future, hoping to work with a Labour government for the foreseeable future too.
Sadiq Khan, thank you.
Cheers.